Thank you for tuning into this presentation. My name is Nathan Swanson. I'm a postdoctoral fellow in the Honors College at Purdue. And I want to talk about a project I've been working on over the past year, funded through a SILMAR mini grant, entitled Developing an Outreach and Recruitment Model to Promote Diversity in Honors Study Abroad. So what I'll do today is to kind of give you a quick overview of the project, talk about how it's evolved over the course of the year, introduce to you quickly the team that's been helping me on this project, and then I'll get into some of our methods, our initial results, and then sort of think more broadly and into the future about where this project will go. So this project emerged from a persistent problem in study abroad, which is an underrepresentation of a particular group of students. And we can see this data from the Association of International Educators. This is from the 2018-2019 school year. But this represents a much longer term trend in study abroad participation. So what we can see is that for the three groups of students, especially that are highlighted here, and these are groups of underrepresented minority students, African American and Black students, Hispanic and Latino American students, and American Indian and Alaska Native students, that these particular groups of students are represented in at a rate in study abroad that's about half of the rate at which they're represented in terms of overall enrollment in U.S. higher education programs. And the other kind of student population that is underrepresented are first generation students, and that data is a little harder to pin down and show you because of different definitions and used in different places, but there's also a relationship between these two groups. So we know, for example, at Purdue that URM students are twice as likely to be first generation students than their white counterparts, and so this project is really targeting this persistent problem and seeking to increase participation of underrepresented students, so again, URM and first-gen students, in Honors College study away programs. And so we're sort of operationalizing those terms according to the university's definitions. And this project comes into a broader context of wanting to increase engagement of URM, first-gen, and international students as well in some of our Honors College programs and activities, particularly in the areas of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and intercultural learning. So the plan originally kind of sketched out for this project was to, look through the academic literature on barriers to study abroad participation for URM and first-gen students, to then develop an outreach and recruitment plan, strategies, model, right, responding to those barriers, and to also identify those which may be outside the scope of the project. The idea then was to test these strategies over the course of the year while recruiting for 2021 programs, and then finally to produce a model, for subsequent years. So even if it's kind of meant to be an adjustment, at least to kind of have a model in place based on the experience and sort of testing strategies and so on over the course of this year. So I, at the beginning of the year, sort of assembled a team to help work with this, and I just want to make sure that they're credited for their really huge contributions to this project. These are intercultural ambassadors, which effectively served as research assistants for this year. So that's Maron Temene and Bella Matthews, who are both Honors College students, and a graduate student who joined us on the project, Victoria Parker, in the College of Agriculture. So we set to work digging into the literature, and there were kind of two intervening events that happened early on in the fall semester. So one of those was the cancellation of 2021 programs, the Maymester and summer and spring break programs, due to the ongoing pandemic. So those were going to be kind of our programs that we were going to group for. We were going to test strategies and try to build this model for outreach and recruitment. So with those programs canceled, we had to sort of think about what it meant to sort of build the model. At the same time, as we started digging early into the literature review and really started discussing and kind of reflecting on those, on what we were reading, but also just our own experiences, working on campus and working with a diverse student body and thinking about the sort of, the challenges, the experience, what we've learned, lessons learned just from these experiences, it became pretty clear that we needed to think too about those kind of broader long-term series of interventions that would address barriers to participation. And so this meant addressing the study abroad experience from start to finish, right? So recruitment, yes, but also enrollment and pre-departure, the on-site program, and the post-return follow-up. So we turned our focus to try to kind of create, again, a model that we can put in place for next year. So even though we couldn't test it, at least to develop a model. And then for the longer term, to sort of map out some broader interventions that would address barriers. So this became the sort of way that we proceeded, going through the literature. We ended up doing a benchmarking project, not something I originally planned, but actually emerged from an idea from one of the students, to look at actually peer institutions. So we were reading about some of these initiatives, but we wanted to actually then dig into some of the websites for peer universities, see how they're communicating study abroad commitments to diversity and so on. So that became a major piece to the project. And we also have completed study abroad trainings and short courses. So there's a group called an organization, Diversity Abroad, whose very purpose is to promote diversity and study abroad. So we use their trainings. And again, also working through our own kind of experiences, our own work on campus, especially in diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we're also then in regular consultation with others in the Honors College that we could continue to, as the project evolved, make sure that we were sort of meeting the broader needs and fitting within the broader goals of the program and the project. So I want to credit our grad assistant, Victoria Parker, who spent a lot of time kind of putting together and organizing some of the literature. And so she helped us to identify 5 barriers to participation. And these range, as you can see on the screen, and you're welcome to pause and sort of dig into them a little more closely, but largely around financial barriers, family support, fear of experiencing racism, inadequate outreach efforts, and the absence of peer mentors. So these were kind of the 5 barriers that you see throughout the literature and that we've been working to address as we've been building a model. So the kind of the initial results, kind of the immediate results, the results in progress, we'll say, are this emerging model that we'll implement in fall 2021. So at the heart of this is a training manual for intercultural ambassadors. And so it kind of took us a while to see what would this model actually look like. And this is kind of the physical space, if you will, where all of this has started to come together. So creating a training manual for future intercultural ambassadors, so future students to be involved in this work. That includes a calendar year sort of timeline as to what they'll be doing throughout the year, and also includes some of those broader interventions, both in kind of short and long term. And due to the benchmarking project as well, we also are about to engage in a discussion within the Honors College with the communications staff and others about what we learned from the benchmarking project. And I'll talk about these in a little more detail. So again, expect that this model will be evolving over several years. The literature seems to suggest that these outreach efforts should be measured in sort of 2 to 5 year cycles. And so the expectation is that we'll continue to assess and adjust this model as we actually kind of get to test it out, hopefully in the years ahead. And so I'll talk as well in a few moments about some of the future directions we've identified, which are largely in that category of the kind of broader interventions, those aspects of study abroad that are not just related to outreach and students. So this training manual does a number of things. It's educating the future ambassadors on what we've learned this year about participation and barriers to study abroad. Has all kinds of communication strategies for discussing study abroad, for promoting it, for creating individual peer outreach, for making the ambassadors aware right away of financial aid and scholarship information, things that students can share with parents, and identifying new venues and partners on campus for study abroad outreach. So for example, potentially working with cultural centers, reaching out to student organizations that are serving especially underrepresented students, and trying to go beyond the sort of traditional types of outreach and recruitment, reflecting on those barriers that have been identified. So again, part of this is an academic year timeline. This involves hiring, which is happening here very soon, next year's intercultural ambassadors, and then at the start of the year, training them and getting them working right away on recruitment. So that's going to be some traditional type of study away recruitment, tabling, and events, and so on, but also building in those direct and individual outreach and mentorship pieces that the literature suggests are so important. So we're now designing this this calendar again as part of this training manual that sort of puts out these ideas, these kind of things that we would have wanted to test this year, types of events, outreach activities, but we were unable to because of the cancellations and so on. So I expect then the next year, part of this cycle will be in the early spring to assess the research strategies, to see what should be changed and to adjust the model as we need to going forward. Part of this year in progress too, again, thinking about the whole study abroad experience, is supporting pre-departure efforts. So in the spring next year and going forward, we'll focus on the intercultural ambassadors helping to prepare students for the experience abroad, for understanding dimensions of diversity in the countries where we're taking our programs, better understanding histories of discrimination there so that they're better understood, the students better understand them, and also so that students that may not be affected by it are also aware and sort of trying to build a sense of solidarity among the students. Part of this year-long calendar too involves intercultural ambassadors assisting with a variety of other tasks like communications and other kind of interventions. And so some of that communication work at this time has been through that website, through that benchmarking project. And so we kind of took some major takeaways from that included the way that different ways that commitments to diversity are expressed through websites, the way that participation, we can promote diversity and participation, but also in terms of destinations and experiences, thinking about the way that textual information communicates, but also images communicate our commitments. We've looked at a number of examples of ways that students can better see themselves represented in study abroad. And this idea of kind of speaking to underrepresented students and not just about diversity in study abroad, but actually, again, trying to help students see themselves as part of the experience. And we've also kind of looked to some particular examples, things that we're sharing with the Honors College Communications team, and again, looking for different ways that we can have the resources that students need very easily accessible. And in terms of those broader interventions, these are the kind of things that the outreach and recruitment process can't necessarily handle, but which are important to the broader goal of diversifying study abroad. So these initial interventions we expect to begin in the coming year as well, and starting with our advising team in the Honors College. So preparing a presentation to talk to them, to help them better communicate the needs and challenges of underrepresented students in study abroad, and some strategies for discussing study abroad with them. And this comes from the importance we see in the literature of individual outreach and mentorship provided. It's important at the peer level, but it's also important from faculty and staff to promoting study abroad participation. And then the intercultural ambassadors will also be thinking about future interventions, helping to plan the content, the format, and to identify partners and collaborators. And so these longer terms, this is where I think about the kind of future directions of the project. Here we're talking about developing training modules for faculty. So one about kind of ensuring diverse perspectives in program design and recruitment, but also preparing faculty for difficult conversations on the ground and for meeting the needs of a diverse student body participating in study abroad programs. So we hope that these will sort of help to diversify also the program destinations and topics and so on that are covered in a sort of longer term goal. We also are thinking about ways to address the financial barriers, so ways that we can seek external support, for example, to perhaps to fundraise. And then a final example of a kind of future direction we're thinking about, something we're developing more broadly in the Honors College is, again, that kind of post-return follow-up, helping students to communicate their experience, but also helping them to kind of continue their intercultural learning. So the broader implications of this project, we hope to be developing a model that can be used in other colleges and scaled up to the university level as well. So these broader goals of making study abroad more accessible, making study abroad more inclusive, and in doing so, advancing intercultural learning for all of the students who are participating in study abroad programs. And so that just sort of underscores, something else that I hope this project does, which is that need for a holistic approach to promoting diversity in study abroad. So we can't just focus on sort of trying to recruit better and to do better outreach, but we really need to think about inclusive practices from start to finish. So from recruitment and enrollment, again, all the way through pre-departure, the on-site program, and post-return. So thank you very much for tuning in. Once again, I want to thank Silmar for supporting this project this year through the mini grant program, and certainly for all of the contributions to this project from my intercultural ambassadors this year, and to Dr. Natasha Duncan as well in the Honors College. So please feel free to reach out to me with any questions, and thank you for tuning into the presentation.